Well, in. Oh, great. Hi, everybody. Hello, welcome. Great. We're just gonna take a couple moments and let people log in here. Awesome. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Hello. Great. Oh man, so many people. This is so exciting.
Yay.
Yay. All right. Well, while people are getting logged in, I'm going to go ahead and start if I can figure out how to use my computer here. Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Clementine Thomas, and I'm the owner of Old Fork Books. We are a culinary bookshop located here in Washington, D.C. We carry a curated assortment of cookbooks, food writing, home goods, beverage books, a little bit of everything. Believe it or not, we opened just over 2 months ago now, and we could not be more excited to welcome the fabulous Luisa Weiss here for our very first event, virtual or otherwise. Luisa is, of course, the author of My Berlin Kitchen and the fabulous classic German baking, which is the subject of today's holiday baking extravaganza. You might also know Luisa from her blog, The Wednesday Chef, or from her swoon-worthy Instagram feed. So today, Luisa will be teaching us how to make the classic Nürmberg Christmas cookie. I was going to try and say it, and I just flaked out at the last minute. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to try it. Elisenlebkuchen. Did I get it?
Elisenlebkuchen.
Elisenlebkuchen. Close. Close.
Yeah.
So Luisa will also be answering all of our burning questions about German Christmas traditions. So today, Luisa will be in conversation with Nikki Hoffstetter-Phelps. Nikki is a communications specialist here at the Goethe Institute in Washington, D.C., and she is also an incredible baker in her own right. She teaches culinary classes locally, and you can follow all of her bread and pastry making adventures on her blog, Nikki Out West, or follow her on Instagram at Nikki Out West. So that about does it for me today. I also just want to say a really sincere thank you for all of you for taking an hour and a half out of your Sunday to join us for a little bit of baking joy. Obviously, this has been a very, very strange year, and I know I could use a little bit of holiday cheer now more so than ever, so it means a lot that you all are joining us today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the reins to Nikki and Luisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll start with you, Luisa. First of all, I'm very excited and thrilled and honored that you are joining us from Berlin, from your kitchen, directly to our homes. And it's such a pleasure to, be in communication with you personally. And I do own your book there. I've got it about 4 years ago when I moved to the United States in 2016, and that was the moment where I said I need a comprehensive German baking book, because actually there is no baking book like that, I think, at least in Germany, that I'm aware of. So this is terrific. And yeah, so please, go ahead with your baking. I'm obviously interested in what inspired you for this book, and so maybe you want to say a few words before we get started on the Elisenlebkuchen.
Yes, so I agree. There was always this hole in the market, especially in the United States, for whom this book was published, for all of you guys. There was always this hole in the market for a classic German cookbook, really. And when I was a cookbook editor once upon a time, and when I was a cookbook editor, I always had my eye open for who was going to be the right person to write this book. And I never was able to find that person, but it was this sort of open question that I and colleagues of mine at rival publishing companies shared, because it was such an obvious sort of gap in the market. And then I moved to Berlin and I wrote my first book, My Berlin Kitchen, and I had a baby. And I was talking with one of my former colleagues in California, and we got to talking about this project or this idea of this book that would fill this hole. And he said, you know, you're the right person to write it. And I thought, no, you're crazy. And then eventually I thought, actually, maybe he's right. And so that's how that came about, really. It was a very pragmatic thing. And yeah, and 4 years later, it's, I feel it holds up. It really is like a very good, solid collection of the greatest hits of German baking, but also Swiss and Austrian baking. And I mean, you know, we could have written 4 books. We could have filled so many more pages with so many more treats. It was hard to whittle it down, but I think we did a pretty good job. And I say we because my friend Maya helped me on it, and she was really essential and integral to the testing and production of all the stuff that we made. So anyway, I'm gonna make Elisenlebkuchen, as I already mentioned, as you guys all know, because I've been tooting about it on Instagram. Elisenlebkuchen are the sort of, they're really famous, right? They're usually about this big. They come in these beautiful decorative tins. They're often coated in chocolate or sometimes in the sugar glaze. And they're really like juicy, chewy, wonderfully rich cookies. And I always thought that you sort of had to be like a Nürnberg baker to have the license to make these, until we started writing this book. And I was like, oh, actually, you know, home cooks can make these too. This is incredible. Not only that, but they're actually really easy to make. It's just a matter of sourcing the ingredients. They're completely nut-based. There's no flour, so they're technically gluten-free. But the thing that's important to know about them is that classically they're baked on a wafer, on an oblate. I bought some to show you because I know that not everybody was able to find them before this baking class, and that's fine. But this is what they look like. They're like the host when you take mass and when you do mass. And what you're supposed to do with these oblaten is with a little sharp paring knife, you sort of insert it in there are 2 layers to every oblate. You wouldn't think that because they're so thin, but you sort of cut them apart. And then you've got a smooth side, the outside side, and a rough side. And you want to put the smooth side down and the gritty side up if you are using these. Now,
so why do you cut them apart?
Because the gritty side adheres to the mixture, to the cookie batter better.
Oh, okay.
Than the side.
Someone already has a question. They asked, is there an alternative you recommend when you
Okay, the alternative is just don't use them. The alternative is bake them directly on parchment paper or a silicone mat. This is traditional and classic. And if you don't have a gluten problem, or if you don't have a sourcing problem, just use them, because they're nice. They taste nice. I mean, they don't taste like anything, but you know, they don't taste bad. They're just kind of there. They meld into the cookie. But if you don't have them, it is not the end of the world.
Right. I did actually bake them yesterday without wafers, and it worked totally fine. There's
Totally
no problem.
fine. Exactly. So yay, you don't need them. Okay, so what are we gonna do? I'm just gonna get started on this recipe. I'm gonna have to use the stand mixer. Nikki's gonna tell me if it gets too loud, in which case I will turn off my microphone and it'll be a one-woman show for a little while. Is you put eggs, 5 eggs in the bowl of a stand mixer. Can you see me? Yeah, you can see what I'm doing, right? And then you add 350 grams of sugar. And then you grate in marzipan or almond paste. So here it comes in a little package and it's incredibly soft, and you can just sort of squish it. I have a feeling, I think most of you guys, if you're using that Danish almond paste, it might be a little bit harder. Yes.
Actually, the soft one is available in the regular grocery, well-stocked grocery store.
Perfect. Then that's great. So then if most of you are working with something as soft as this, we're in good shape.
I also know a lot of people make it themselves. You have a recipe for almond paste in the book, right? At the end. Where you,
recipe in the book, and it's a great, you'll get a higher quality almond paste if you make it yourself.
right.
There'll be a higher quantity of nuts than whatever this is, but anyway. Okay, all right, and so we grate it in. I mean, grating something that's this soft is sort of cuckoo, but it creates smaller pieces that then get absorbed into the nut batter better.
So someone is asking Luisa if when they use a Danish almond paste, is there anything special they need to do with it because it's harder? No, just use it.
No, it just, honestly, I think it's harder because it's been sitting for longer. I think it's a more shelf-stable, industrialized,
Right.
really produced product, I think. But no, it's the same exact thing.
I would just grate that exactly like you're doing it right now and then put it directly into the sugar.
Yep.
And
Exactly. So I'm gonna stop with this because I feel like I'm gonna do the rest by hand.
So one person is asking, do we have all the sugar and the eggs in the bowl now? I think that's right. And is it possible to mix it by hand?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hassle, it's a lot of beating. If you don't have a stand mixer, you could use a hand beater, an electric beater. And of course, I'm just gonna wash my hands real quick.
Can you also use a food processor for this?
I'm sorry?
A food processor, would that also be a good idea? Or is it because of the eggs not recommended?
No, I wouldn't use a food processor because I think you'd be whipping the eggs in a different manner, right?
Okay, yeah, right. So I wouldn't do what the whisk is doing now.
Exactly.
Okay. That's all right. You don't have to mute. I think it's fine. Yes, it's okay.
Okay. So while that's going, you want to beat it until it's frothy and sort of thick, and the marzipan almond paste has completely fused into the rest of the ingredients. So that's a few minutes.
So I made this yesterday and I used a paddle attachment actually instead of the whisk, which worked okay. It was kind of it started to be kind of really creamy and thick. Small bubbles were appearing at the end. So that's what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty.
So I have another question for you. It's someone is asking about the candied orange and citrus peels, lemon peels.
I can't actually hear you because it's too loud. I'm gonna put in my.
Okay.
Maybe. Oh wait. Will this make a difference? Is this better?
I can hear you fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, this is a good idea for me. So we'll try.
Okay.
No, it's not. Not me. Yes. So peel. What we have here in Germany is candied orange and candied citron peel that you can buy at any grocery store, and it comes sort of pre-cubed. I'll show you. If I can open this. And if you'll see, the cubes are pretty small, but they're too big for the cookies. We want minced. So while the machine is going, is there a question, like a specific question about it?
Yeah, I mean, actually, people are asking about what can we substitute for it. So I have actually found something like this. It's a candied slice of orange that they sell at Trader Joe's.
Yep.
And they also sell, because someone asked, can I use candied ginger, which they also sell at that store. And I actually, yesterday when I made the recipe, I only used 150 grams of the oranges and 50 grams of the candied ginger to add this little tart taste to it. And I would suggest, yes, that's a good idea. You can do that. And you need to really mince them, as you say, in a food processor. That's what I did. I chopped them and put them in a food processor to make them really, fine pieces.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think I would encourage people to experiment with what they can find at their stores.
I do have sources in the back of the book that tell you where you can find candied citrus peels in the US or mail order. And there's quite a few options out there. I'm a purist, so I stick to the original orange and citron. They get so finely chopped, and there's so much going on in the cookie that you don't, if you think you don't like citrus peel, don't worry about it. You're not really going to notice that it's citrus peel. Right. It's not like you're chewing on a piece of peel, really. Like you would be with like orange marmalade or something like that.
So the marzipan is also in the food process, in the mixer right now, right? Yes, because someone was asking that. Yes, eggs, sugar, and marzipan are right now in the stand mixer getting whipped.
I can show you all what it looks like. Hang on, because it's looking pretty good. Can you see how it's sort of frothy and thick and beautiful?
Right.
So that's good. We're in good shape. So the next thing we have to add is the, actually no, I'm not done chopping yet. So I'm gonna turn this off. If I wasn't talking to you, I would just keep going, but I feel like we're gonna let that.
So the mixer was on like medium speed, or what speed did you use?
It was like on 4, medium.
4, okay.
It doesn't have to be high speed. Yeah, and sort of, you just mince up your peel as finely as you can. Don't go crazy, but like, don't leave them chunky.
Okay, someone is asking again about the Danish marzipan. Do we want almond paste or marzipan that is extra sweet? Oh.
Oh no, we lost Luisa.
I think it's, yeah, her screen got frozen.
Let me see if I can get.
Seems like everybody has left us. Ah, there you are.
I'm back. I'm just waiting on Luisa to log back
to rejoin us.
Here.
Okay. I'll try to answer the questions that are still open.
And there's some in the for everybody that's asking questions. These are all awesome. If we could, I think it's easier if we do them all through the Q&A function, which should be on the bottom of your Zoom screen. That is a little bit easier to keep track of right now, but we'll also try and get to all the ones that are popping up in the chat as well.
Oh, we'll have some in the chat as well, right? I see that. Okay. All right. Someone was asking about the almonds and how much they should be chopped, what size. So that would be similar, like when Luisa said minced almond orange peels or candied orange peels, that should be about the same size. So what I did yesterday was I put everything into my food processor and ground them, not on fine, but like a coarse ground. So you still have visible pieces of it. Okay, what are the other questions? Well, about the marzipan, the Danish marzipan, German baking traditionally isn't as sweet, so usually I would go for a less sweet marzipan because there's also a lot of quite some sugar in the recipe. So I avoid extra sweet ingredients, but if your palate is more sweet, then of course you can just experiment and use the extra sweet brand or version of the marzipan, I think. All right, what other questions? So I made these yesterday, and I used all the ingredients I got over here in the United States, because I have not been in Germany for a while and was not able, but I usually do pick up a lot of the ingredients that are typically to find in Germany. So I got everything over here, and I would just encourage you to not give up, even if you feel like you haven't, you're unable to find it, because also the spices and everything else that's used in this recipe, you can actually really make yourself at home, because Luisa has this wonderful resource in the back of her book where she describes a lot of things, that are more typical to find in Germany to make from scratch here. And that's actually really great. I learned so much from it, because when you bake in Germany, typically you don't have to worry about it. You just go to the store and pick it up. But that wasn't possible for me here anymore. So I learned how to do these things from scratch, and that's actually quite a nice experience. So I'm sorry that this is now interrupted. That gives you guys who are baking with us an extra time to prep and to work on your recipe, and I hope I get everybody else also entertained a little bit. I'm just going to try to keep track of your questions as well. Somebody recommended Olive Nation Candied Orange and said it was pretty much similar to the what we know as Zitronat and Orangeat in Germany. So that's a good tip. Let me see what else. Okay, then someone else recommended that in the US you're able to order gluten-free oblat no wafers from online, which is interesting. But again, it's actually really not absolutely necessary to have them, because it really works very well without them. I made them yesterday, and I just popped them on my parchment paper, and it just came off really nicely. So no problem there. And yes, the wafers are actually edible, although some people might find them a little odd in taste. Okay, then there's a resource that somebody mentions in the chat, which is called nuts.com, and you can find obviously a lot of the ingredients there to order online. And and yes, the China, somebody commented, it is my collection mostly from overseas.
She's back, yay!
I was just trying to keep people entertained. Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That's okay, welcome back.
Okay, hi. Where were we? Okay, so I've chopped up the peel pretty finely. And with this thing going, we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of this Lebkuchen, which is this special spice mixture for gingerbreads. There's a recipe for it in the back of the book, but it's basically, all the classics: cinnamon, allspice, whatever, everything else.
Yeah, you have this recipe in the back of your book too, right? Yes, and you can actually find all the spices easily here from different brands in regular grocery stores, or you can order them from special brands online. That's quite a lot of it going into this recipe, I noticed.
Yeah, it's a lot, because there's a lot of nuts and a lot of stuff that needs to be fully flavored.
Right.
They're not wimpy cookies. And then we add the grated peel of a lemon. So I'm actually going to stop the machine again and do this sort of over the side.
Oh, and somebody got confused. Actually, just need to answer that comment. No, there is no candied ginger in that recipe. That was just an answer I gave because someone asked if that can also go in there. But that's not part of the recipe. It will be an experiment that you guys can do if you want to. I'm so happy that they have these zesters now. I used to do this. It was so difficult to zest a lemon before, but now they have these great tools.
Yeah.
I have one too now.
I bought this microplane at Zesters in like 2000.
Oh, yes. So it's also a microplane? Okay. Yeah, I have one too. It has a little handle, a black one.
Yeah, you can't, or you rarely find them like this anymore. They all have the handle.
Right, they have this handle. Yeah, that's what they look like now.
Okay, so we're gonna add all the chopped peel as best we can. Whoops. I'll get those stray ones. And then stuff is so sticky. And then you want to add the ground nuts. So here they're nicely, they're sold in 200-gram packages. So that's really easy, but it's hazelnuts and almonds from California.
So can you use any other, like instead of hazelnuts, maybe some people have problems with like little allergy problem with hazelnuts. Could you use something else?
So I think the issue with hazelnuts, well, my feeling, there's like a tree nut allergy, right? So if you're allergic to tree nuts, then you can't have any kind of nut that's on a tree. Somebody might want.
So it would be the same with pecans or walnuts.
Exactly. So, and the pecans are a wonderful nut. They're very, very hard to find, yes. And they're extremely expensive. I mean, all nuts are expensive, but pecans are very expensive and would not have been around 800 years ago.
At that time, right.
And walnuts have too much of a strong flavor. You know, they can sort of more.
So they're would be a little bit overpowering.
Okay. Yeah. Almonds are like the white paint of the nut family. I don't know. I feel like they just kind of blend into the background and take on whatever flavor you have. And then there's, I mean, hazelnuts, yeah, they have a pretty strong flavor too. But anyway, this is the classic combo. And let's see, what else are we adding? Salt. Oh, and the final thing are chopped nuts. So you have more blanched, chopped up nuts. This size is a little bit too big, I find. So I like to give these a little bit of a finer chop, but like, again, don't go crazy. You can really drive yourself nuts.
Literally.
I cannot say it. But you can really go a little crazy, making things too fine and perfect. This is a pretty rustic cookie, but it shouldn't be too crunchy. You want it to sort of be more like a confection. Okay, I think that's fine. That's as fine as it's gonna get.
Okay. Let me see.
Piece of information for people who are interested in how the sausage of cookbooks are made, but no like antique German baking recipe ever includes salt. None of them, none. And so whenever we found a recipe in some old cookbook or some, I don't know, somewhere, check, no salt. So we had to add salt everywhere. Because it's important.
So there was no salt in the original recipes that you looked at? Oh, okay, interesting. Well, nowadays, I mean, there are lots of people arguing salt's just a night, so it enhances all the flavor. So that's why it should go into any baked good, a little bit of it.
in there just to give everything else something to hold on to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're just mixing until it's combined.
So, okay, so all the ingredients on the recipe are now in your mixture, right? Okay.
There's not much more to do than that.
All right. Oh, so you're still using the whisk? It's still okay. It's not too thick for this. Okay.
No, the KitchenAid whisk attachment is pretty sturdy.
Mm-hmm.
Use a whisk attachment for like an electric beater or whatever. Those ones are a little flimsier.
Yeah, although I mean the voltage is slightly different in Germany, so it's more powerful. I found, and the handheld mixers that you can use here are kind of, they give up at a certain point.
Well, that's good to know.
Because of the, the difference in voltage. So I found that it's not advisable to use it on on things that are too tough.
Wait, but someone asked to see the consistency of your mixture.
Yeah, I will. I will show you. I'm just gonna rinse my hands again. I should be wearing an apron. So let's see. Let me just give it one final stir. Remember that as it sits, even just for a couple minutes, the ground nuts are gonna hydrate. So, but this is basically it.
So it's kind of a really stiff batter. Is that true? Can you describe it like that?
It's a stiff looking batter. Smells incredible. And that's really it. And it's kind of messy. Like,
yeah. Okay. So it's also kind of sticky and all right.
It's kind of sludgy. But this is it. So all the hard work is done. Once again, I feel like German baking, it's intimidating from afar, but then when you actually get down to it, it's really, most of the recipes are incredibly easy. These are not recipes that require a lot of like pastry knowledge.
Also, I find them pretty forgiving. So if you are not super exact, like 100% exact on your ingredients, it's still turning out okay.
Exactly. That's a very, very good way.
So someone in the audience tasted the batter and said it is delicious.
So this is hilarious because Maya, my friend who helped me with this book, she's a batter taster. She loves tasting cake batter, cookie batter. She thinks it's really important. I can't stand it. I think
really?
I don't.
So you never do that while baking? Interesting.
Whenever we were baking together, she'd be like, oh yeah, needs a little more salt. And I was like, thank goodness you're here. Because
so you're also not the target group for the cookie batter or the cookie dough that you can buy in the refrigerated aisle and eat like unbaked. That was a real cultural experience for me when I first saw it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I thought it was an American thing, like eating, chocolate chip cookie dough and ice cream. Well, but right. Mine's German, and she enjoyed it. So I'm just going to do a couple of these on the wafers to show you all the technique. This is not.
I just have one more question for you that seems to be important at this point. Someone says it's too wet, so it's maybe too runny. For should they add more almond flour or ground almonds to make it a little bit more stiff?
Person answer, like, is it wetter than this? Is it sort of? Because so you want it to be a little bit. It shouldn't be.
And she says a little. It's a little bit wetter than the one.
A little bit better. So you have two options. You can either wait like 5 more minutes, give the ground nuts time to absorb the moisture and sort of calm down and get a little drier through that, or you can add a little bit more ground nut flour if you have it. But I would go easy, like start out with 1 or 2 tablespoons more, not more than that, because you don't want this to become too dry. The whole joy of these cookies is that they have an almost juicy consistency when they're done. If it's very dry, what do we add? Oh boy. That's a good question. I would add maybe if like really dry, I would add maybe an egg, one more egg, but actually I would beat the egg in a bowl and I would add
Just a little at a time. Okay.
Yeah.
So that that batter does not get refrigerated before you use it, right? Okay.
It's ready to go. It's fired up and ready to go. So what you do, I just do this with a butter knife really, is that you take a little dollop of it and you sort of smear it onto the wafer, the halved wafer. And then you kind of do like you kind of go around the edges, smearing it down all the way around.
So it's not, the wafer is not visible anymore once it's baked. Okay.
The wafer is not visible. And the cookie will mostly stay on the wafer. These don't really grow because there's no.
So also, are they not expanding towards the sides when you bake them, or just staying in shape pretty much?
I mean, they'll expand a little bit because of the egg, but not too much.
So you flattened it a little bit on top. Is that what you did?
No, I was just kind of trying to make it more even.
Oh, okay.
Might add a little less, but no, it shouldn't. It should look basically like that.
Okay.
And then you just pop it down on the.
So when you don't use wafers, how would you do it then? You just.
Okay. I think what you did yesterday with yours was pretty brilliant. Certainly is way more work than I would go to the.
Yeah, I'm just well.
Very lazy in my private life. So here, let me just do one more like that just to show you. That's about it. This is, as we were saying, all of German baking, it's relatively forgiving. I mean, unless we're talking about a Sachertorte. I'm gonna do a couple, so what I would do is just take a spoon and take out, about the amount that you want for the cookie, and then just dollop it down.
Okay, so you used a tablespoon. You're using a tablespoon, and what I did actually was I took the top of a jar.
Yep.
And made circles on my parchment papers, which was about in diameter about 2 inches, roughly, and then just filled that circle with batter. And I think it was about like 1.5 tablespoons, the amount roughly for that size.
Yeah.
Which is a small size compared to what you usually have in Germany when you have an Elisenlebkuchen, which is kind of more, bigger.
Exactly.
At least when you buy them from the store.
Exactly, and it's actually really relatively challenging to find larger size wafers for regular use for regular sort of.
So someone is asking the preheated. You're preheating your oven, right? At the moment, at what degree? Fahrenheit was 300, and that would be in Celsius.
150.
150. Okay.
Very hot oven.
And yes, another question is, do we need to refrigerate this? No, we don't. We bake it right away. The batter can sit a little bit just to have it a little bit more stiff if you want it to be more, easily to handle, but it's still sticky, is it? I mean, it's not a batter that's kind of dropping off your spoon or something. It's going to be sticky all the way.
And sticky. And if you didn't have time, like let's say you made the batter and suddenly the house was on fire next door, not yours, you could run out and do something else and refrigerate this batter probably for up to a day. I don't think it would suffer that much from being refrigerated.
Oh, okay. So that's possible, or you could prepare it the night before and then bake in the morning if you choose.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And again, the question is, do the cookies spread? They don't spread much, right?
Not much. They'll spread a little bit, but not much, just because there's no leavener in them besides the beaten egg.
Right, exactly. There's no baking powder or any baking soda or anything, right?
And the egg is being tamed by all extremely heavy
The-
nuts and
right.
marzipan and everything. So they're really not going to go anywhere. And these wafers, they're most famous underneath these gingerbreads, these Lebkuchen, but you can use them for all kinds of other kinds of cookies that are nut-based. Like, for example, Zimtsterne, which are these cinnamon stars topped with meringue that are also all nut.
Oh, right. Okay. So you just break them off after baking, or how do you do this?
Some people just like them. They like baking the Zimtsterne on the Oblate, on the
Oh,
way.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Germany they have all kinds of sizes. They even have like rectangular size. And,
Yeah. It helps if you do the wafer splitting ahead of time. And that way, if you're under pressure because you're on a Zoom call with 200 people, you know, split them in half.
So I'm just gonna go through a couple of more questions that are on here that we might have overlooked before.
Absolutely.
What's the difference between almond paste and marzipan? I've heard you answer that question before, but you might want to tell us again.
Absolutely. This is a perennially good question. So it's confusing because in German, marzipan is the same word for almond paste as almond paste, which is Marzipan Rohmasse, which just translates to raw mass marzipan. So basically, almond paste, as I explain it in the book, also known as Marzipan Rohmasse, is just almonds processed with sugar until smooth and creamy, or sticky. And sometimes, depending on the quality of the product, there might be a little bit more almonds and a little bit less. Sometimes the sweetener used is honey and not sugar, which makes for a more expensive product. This is in Germany. I don't think you can get honey marzipan in the States. Almond paste, sorry. See, I always get confused because but marzipan in the United States or in the UK, also known as Marzipan here in Germany, is almond paste that's been further sweetened with sugar and then flavored with things like rose water and molded into confections and then either fired again in the oven or covered in chocolate or whatever. And so it's even sweeter and it's more processed, and you wouldn't use it in baking because it's already at its final stage, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense.
So what you're using is Marzipan Rohmasse, which has not been tempered with pretty much other than putting it together.
And Marzipan Rohmasse is basically the same thing that you're making when you're just grinding almonds and sugar together in your food processor.
Right. All right, another question is, did you self-grind the hazelnuts? No, you did not. You were able to buy them at the store. Did I self-grind my hazelnuts? Yes, yesterday in a food processor. And actually, somebody asked, did you process the citrus with the almonds and the nuts, the other nuts? I used actually pecans. Yes, I did, because that way everything was already nicely mixed and because the citrus peel that I use is kind of rather sticky when it's minced. So yes, I did mince everything together. So it was kind of the same size, ground size.
That's nice. That'll make for an even more refined cookie.
And then let's see, someone is making their own candy citrus peels. That's of course wonderful. With bergamots and different types of lemons you can get in California, I'm assuming.
Well, lucky California.
I'm always envious when I see people there with their citrus. Oh, someone is asking an interesting question. What's a good US substitute for vanillezucker?
So you make your own, really. You grind up a vanilla bean with sugar, and you'll have much better Vanillezucker than anything you could ever buy in a store. But the fact that vanilla extract is commonly used in the US, it's far better than vanilla sugar, which is sweet. And so it messes with whatever you're adding it to.
Right, I think the only trouble you have with that is when you want to do Vanillekipferl, you need to roll them in vanilla sugar. But for that purpose, I actually found powdered vanilla, like a vanilla powder here in the US. I think I ordered it online. Also available in Germany, actually. The little packages of powdered vanilla, and then you can mix it, any way you want. Like, which is nice.
I would love to have a source for that. That sounds great, because I heard recently that vanilla is now more expensive than gold. Is that right?
It actually, yes, it's quite an expensive spice, and the way it's grown. And I think it's also fair to pay a good price for all these spices that are grown.
Yes, it's important to pay
and not make them a commodity that's just very inexpensive. Okay, let me see. Somebody's recommending Bob Red Mill for some of the ingredients. Yes, I also find that Bob's Red Mill a really good source for different types of flours and other ingredients.
Nuts.com is an amazing resource.
Right, somebody mentioned that too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have all the crazy leaveners that you'll need for German baking, all the nuts, all the candied fruit, dried fruit, everything. So that's really good too. I don't know if any of you are baking along, but
it seems like it. Yes, there seem to be a couple of people.
More and more, because you're making the Lebkuchen, like you're doing this stupid work that I'm doing. The batter gets thicker and thicker. So for those of you who are having consistency issues, I hope it's better now.
An interesting comment on the marzipan. Actually, in German, there's a law. There are many rules and regulations in Germany when it comes to food. But obviously also for marzipan rohmasse, it needs to contain at least 50% of almonds. So interesting fun fact.
What is this for? This is some, oh yep, 54, yep.
There you go. Just above that. To be called marzipan rohmasse.
So there was I'd had a baking tutorial Zoom session with my friend Molly a couple weeks ago that I don't know if any of you attended, but I was saying that I had left the grocery shopping for the ingredients for those cookies, which were these marzipan stuffed gingerbread called Biberle. I'd left the grocery shopping to the last minute and gone out to discover that the marzipan was not available. And I sent my husband out to like 4 different grocery stores. We were panicking. Anyway, so in his hunt for marzipan, he found some at the organic grocery store. That's sort of our version of Whole Foods. And he was like, it cost 4 times as much money as the marzipan that I ended up getting. And I went back and I looked at the composition of that fancy marzipan a couple days later, and it was 75% almonds. So
there you go. Okay.
It was more expensive for a reason. Also, it was organic, but whatever. But I just thought that was interesting.
All right. Somebody already put their first tray into the oven. How long at 300 Fahrenheit?
It's, let me see, 20 minutes.
Yes. It depends a little bit on the size I found yesterday, and the thickness of them. Also, I pulled them out when they're slightly golden around the edges. So they started to like brown around the edges, and that was the point I took them out, which was about 35 minutes with my oven. But I also know that oven temperatures, even if it says it's 300, might slightly be off depending on the oven.
It's always good to invest in an oven thermometer to make sure that you know what you're getting when you put whatever you're putting into the oven. we tested the baking times with various different sizes. So this particular size, which is just 5 centimeters or 2 inches or whatever, was about 20 minutes. And then if you're doing the slightly larger one, which is 2 and 3/4 inches or 7 centimeters, it was 27 minutes, but give or take a little bit.
Yeah, I always, with the cookies, I always watch them. I don't walk away. I just watch them, make sure that they look okay. Also, don't let yourself be, it's actually what happened with mine was that they were still soft when I pulled them out. So they're not like really hardened, right? When they're done, because they harden as they cool down. So they were not like a chocolate chip cookie, like crisp. I think that's the word I'm looking for. So don't be surprised when they're not crisp when you pull them out of the oven.
Exactly. Very good point. I'm just going to get another baking sheet.
Okay, now let me see. I have a couple of more questions here. Should you peel the nuts before grinding them? I did not. I used almonds that were that had skin on, and also my pecans were not skinned. So the question was, Luisa, should you skin the nuts before you use them, almonds?
No, I don't think you should. You don't want to use that super fine. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. The cookies were definitely made, these are ancient. This is an ancient gingerbread. And I really doubt that the almonds were peeled however many centuries ago. The whole thing, you want it to be this sort of brown color.
Right.
Which, yeah.
I also always find that the flavor of nuts that aren't skinned is a little bit more pronounced, like also with the almonds. So I actually, when I bake, I prefer the ground almonds that are not skinned, which is actually difficult to find in the US. Most almond meal or almond flour is the white.
Oh, really?
Yes, the blanched almonds. So someone was asking, what's the difference between almond meal and almond flour?
Just the grind.
So it's not really a difference, and it's just almonds that are finer or more coarse. Okay. So there are people from the UK who have joined us today, and someone says in the UK, the marzipan in blocks has only about 30% almonds. So obviously they're not as heavily regulated as in Germany.
Right, but you can still use it. It's still fine. I mean, it's stock up on it when you come visit, but yeah, it'll still be okay.
So we don't decorate the almonds until the cookies come out, right? That's also someone's question.
Exactly. So you can decorate them with a couple different options. You can either make a thin sort of cooked sugar glaze. The recipe, the book tells you how to do that. Or you can melt chocolate and dip them in chocolate for chocolate covered. I personally think chocolate works incredibly well with the strong flavors of the gingerbread. So that's my preference. But obviously you do you. And then on top of that, you can also use blanched almonds as a decoration. Do I have any here? I do. What that means. So this is a blanched almond, a whole one. And ideally, you can sort of split it in half. And then you have a half of an almond with a flat side and a curved side. And you can use these to decorate the top of the cookie. So let's pretend this is the cookie. I think with these tiny ones, one nut would be enough. But on the bigger ones, it's sort of classic to see a trio. So you would have, can you see this? This is so, I feel like my
Also, you have 3 halved almonds.
I have a third one right here. So it'd be
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
like a little petal in a sense.
I have a really terrific tip here from 2 people in the audience who suggest or tell us that you put a vanilla bean in a container of sugar and let it sit in the sugar, and it actually turns it into the most flavorful vanilla sugar.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to store your vanilla beans.
So you don't have to split it, right? So you just a whole.
You can, so there's, whoops, there goes my cookie. You can make vanilla sugar by just sticking a vanilla bean into a pot of sugar. The sugar will sort of get hard because of the moisture from the bean, but it doesn't affect the quality of it or anything. You can also grind up the vanilla bean with sugar. It makes it slightly finer. The vanilla bean is dispersed more finely and the sugar itself gets finer, but they're both great ways of making sure that your sugar is flavored with that very expensive vanilla bean.
Somebody's asking, how many cookies does this recipe make?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, look at this. I feel like I've made barely a dent into this enormous amount of batter. If you're making these little cookies, these little versions, 120.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we found that a lot with almost all the cookie recipes, with very few exceptions, we made a pretty large yield because people are giving these away as gifts. They're baking them, and mostly during the holidays when they're being given away. And so it's actually really helpful to have a large yield.
All right, I will ask a question about the oven temperature real quick. Somebody missed. The oven temperature right now for preheating and baking those is 300 Fahrenheit and 150 Celsius for the European ovens. Okay, do the nuts need to be roasted before grinding?
No, absolutely not. That would intensify the flavor too much. I mean, it wouldn't hurt the cookie, but it's not necessary. The cookie ends up tasting mostly like spices and other things. You don't really taste the nuts per se. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't roast them. I think it's a waste of energy.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can actually buy them roasted here in the US. I found them like at certain stores. It says roasted almonds, roasted, but then they're usually also salted because they're like kind of for, nibbles more than baking.
I mean, I roast every time I buy almonds just for having around, I roast them because we like to eat them roasted much better than we like eating them raw. But for baking, unless it was a recipe that specifically called for it, I wouldn't bother.
Okay. Somebody's commenting on the size of ovens in UK versus the US and is asking about oven size in Germany.
Well, it's funny because I came here when I moved here 10 years ago. I came over with a few of my possessions, including my 2 Chicago metallic baking pan sheets that I had used for a decade. And they didn't fit into my oven. Oh my God, it was the most annoying thing ever. I was like, what? How?
I always say you can never roast a turkey in a German oven.
I was just gonna say, amazing roasting pan that my aunt had given me for Christmas or a birthday or something. This gorgeous, I don't even know what brand it is, but very heavy, very beautiful roasting pan. And when I can fit it into my oven, but it screeches because the sides
are scratching.
Horrible, but I can't bring myself to give it away.
So do you roast a turkey? I'm just asking this as a side question. You roast a turkey every year for Thanksgiving?
usually roast a turkey, at least one turkey, if not more, because I often end up roasting a turkey for my son's school class. But this year it was just a chicken because it was just 5 of us. Like,
yeah, makes sense. Of course, there was not a whole lot of people gathering this year.
No.
Okay. So yes, that answers somebody's question if the ovens in Germany are US size. No, they're not. They're
not. And whenever I watch cooking videos or cooking shows from the States, and I see people like opening these ovens, I could sleep in there. I could, I don't know, put a baby in there. They're so spacious.
Yes. Okay, now I need to keep track of, we have so many questions here. So I'm apologizing to everyone whose questions have not been answered. We'll try to wrap this up at the end and see what hasn't been answered. So if your question has been answered, you can just, I would like to ask you just take it off. So we are left with the things we haven't answered yet. We do have quite a lot of questions, just so you know.
Great.
And
fire away.
Okay. How long do they keep? Interesting question.
Very good question. These keep a long time. A long time. I mean, weeks. So you can make them in early December and be giving them away the whole month, and they'll be fine.
When I do my baking classes, I get a lot of surprised looks oftentimes. So do you store yours? How do you store yours? First of all, that's my question. How do you store your Christmas cookies or these cookies, these types of cookies? How do you store them? At room temperature in the fridge, or where how do you do that?
No, I put them in tins, old cookie tins, whatever, that I save. And I put them in my pantry, which is a little bit colder than my kitchen because it's not heated. And that's pretty much it. Yep.
Okay, because this is something where people always look at me with the surprise looks when I say you can keep them for a long time. You don't have to freeze them. You don't have to put them in the refrigerator. You
Right.
can actually store them pretty much at room temperature as long as it is not like more than 75 in your kitchen.
Americans are very sensitive about food storage.
Right.
And so the idea of keeping something for a long time is very strange and suspect. But a lot of these German cookies are not going to spoil. They can't really spoil. They'll just get better with age.
Well, I always keep telling the story about my my grandmother who would store these cookies in boxes or tins and then put them underneath her bed in her bedroom because it was the coldest place in the house because the bedroom was typically not heated. Plus, she would kind of hide them from everyone. Yeah. So nobody was allowed to eat those until Advent or, way towards Christmas. And she would just literally store and hide them away.
Yes, that sounds very, very correct. My friend Joni, who is my baking guru, who I've talked about a lot, she also keeps cookie dough and stuff that doesn't fit on her balcony. She'll put it in her bedroom because her bedroom is unheated and great.
And most of the time aired, like cracked, the window is cracked. Which is so German.
Highway, and I find it, but that's the way a lot of German people sleep.
I know. You can imagine the discussion we have here in this house about sleeping temp.
German-American couple knows what we're talking about.
Okay. How do we know when they are done? So again, when done baking.
They'll be golden brown at the edge. I'll show you when I take these ones out.
Okay. So
they'll be golden brown at the edge. When you touch them, they won't be sticky anymore. That's the sort of most important thing. Like right now, you know how sticky this dough is. If you put your finger on it, it'll. But if you're done, it'll be dry.
Okay, some people here have been baking along and they're really excited to take out their first tray. So yes, that's always a great moment when you do that, right?
Yeah, mine are still going.
Okay, there's also a little tip again from the audience. Someone says if you don't plan to ice or glaze them with chocolate, you can put the almonds right into the batter before baking, and it's going to be that non-glazed
Yep.
version of it.
Yep.
It's actually really interesting because everybody has their favorites. I remember when we would have Elisenlebkuchen at my house and they came in these packages with 3 chocolate, 3 glazed, 3 non-glazed. Then the non-glazed were always left over. So you could tell first gone is chocolate, second is the glazed, and the non-glazed would sit there untouched.
Yep. They're the black sheep of the Lebkuchen family.
All right. I'm hoping that so far we are caught up on all the questions, or almost all the questions. Somebody's asking about your KitchenAid. They were wondering if you bought it, or if it was a donation from the company when you wrote the book.
It was a very, very kind and generous donation by KitchenAid Europe. They knew I was going to be embarking on this epic journey, and they gave me the machine, and it's great.
Oh my God, now my phone's ringing. Sorry about that, I just have to.
Yeah, I love my KitchenAid. It's a great machine. It's really sturdy. I had to have it, so I used it during the testing process. That was like 18 months of basically daily use, multiple times a day, and it just kept on trucking. It was amazing. I had to have it repaired this summer for some unrelated reason or whatever, delayed. I don't know, but it's great. And my husband just gave me the ice cream attachment for the machine.
So you have the bowl that you can use for churning the ice cream. That's wonderful. Yes.
Amazing. I used it yesterday for the first time, and I am converted.
Okay.
Everyone.
I still stir mine in the like pull it out of the freezer every half hour and then churn it by hand and put it back.
Wow.
But yes, I've been eyeballing that attachment.
It's a worthwhile investment.
All right, good. So, Luisa, since we have time, I have one comment about your book, and that's the reason why I particularly love it. You usually start your recipes with like a story or, explain where that recipe comes from, or it has a personal connection somehow to you. I personally find that wonderful because I think, food is so much like a way of relating our personal experience. So I really like how you set that up because we learn so much about you personally too through that, which you say this is my favorite and I like this because, and I really like that personal touch about that book very much. So
thank you.
I was also wondering, and that I can maybe ask that question now, are you planning to write another book like that for us at some point? Lots of stories?
Let's check on the cookie.
Oh, okay.
No, yes, I think it would be nice to write another one. I think that the most obvious transition is to write another German one that's about cooking this time and not just baking. It's just, I'm gearing up my courage actually, because it's writing cookbooks or writing this cookbook. It's a lot of work. Obviously that sounds silly, but it's a lot of math. It's a lot of eating food that you may not be in the mood for. It's a lot of repetitious sort of, it's hard work. And I needed a break, but I'm definitely open to it. The market is ready for it. I think it would be a good segue from this one. And it'd be nice to have a little package where you had a cooking and a baking.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was telling my husband about this, and he was like, well, why not? I mean, I'm like, are you ready to eat your mother's food for a year and a half?
So do you have a lot of people testing your recipes for you, or did you have a lot of people testing them? Because you wrote that for a US audience, I think, specifically, right?
Yeah, so my friend Maya and I tested the recipes obsessively ourselves until we got them to a point where we were pretty confident that bakers in the US would be mostly okay. We just have to tweak things here and there. So a lot of the recipes in the book have been tested upwards of 10 times. Not all of them. Some of them were easy, but some of them, like random ones, like Pfeffernüsse. I'm not joking. It took us 10 times to get that. 10 tries of tweaking and adjusting and this and all. And by that point, I was like, I hate baking. So then once we had them in the recipes in pretty good shape. And remember, I always have American baking powder in my kitchen. And so a lot of the things that I knew would be tricky, we were already troubleshooting for here. And then, hang on. I don't want these to get overdone. No, these still okay. And then we sent them to friends, testers, family in the States that were willing to give it a go. And so every recipe has also been tested by American bakers.
Oh, okay. So you had people over here testing them, and
that was so important because it's so annoying when recipes don't work, and especially because we were writing this book in metric and US measurements, I felt like it was really important to make sure that people were testing them on both sides.
Actually, that's also something I really appreciate, that your recipes have always both measurements in there, because it's actually not only how you measure, it's actually a cultural experience. It was very difficult for me to switch from metric to cups and teaspoons when I first came here. I mean, I have it now pretty much under control, but it's kind of the way you think about it's I find it interesting because you have an imagination of what a metric measurement means to you, but in the first moment I did not have any imagination. What, do you pack the cup? Do you lose? Is it loose? Is it packed? What's the difference that makes on volume?
Yes,
pretty much.
How about butter measurements? That always cracks me up.
Yes.
Like when you see on the side of in America, on the side of the butter package, however many tablespoons, and yeah.
I mean, that's wonderful that you have it there, but you don't have that on a European style butter, not even here.
Exactly. So, no, I love that. I think you're absolutely right. It is a cultural experience to bake by weight. And I think now a lot of cookbook authors are doing it. I'm definitely not the only one. I think more and more cookbook publishers are actually politely requesting it, if not demanding it.
Yes, now the more recent ones that I bought have both in it, which I find always really helpful.
It's funny, I used to be very evangelical about cups and spoons. I really like baking that way, but now this experience, I'm converted. I only bake with them.
There's someone is asking if you yes, your book includes a recipe for Springerle, right? I just looked it up before. It's in there.
It does. It's my friend Joni's recipe, and it's perfect.
And someone is asking, how did you choose the recipes that are in this book?
Oh, such a good question. So before I started picking recipes, I sat down and I made sort of a list of all the things that I thought had to be in there. That was just, non-negotiable. This has to be in there. This is a classic. This is a classic. I'm gonna pull up a chair. Make myself and then I had this sort of master list, and then we started going through cookbooks, people's recipe boxes, family. My grandmother's cookies are the best, and anybody we could talk to who would offer us a recipe, we would take it and test it and try it. And Maya and we were the gatekeepers, basically. If it was something that we thought was delicious and emblematic of either a region or a cultural experience or something that we felt was important, we kept it in. And that's pretty much how it went. It was really the two of us. And Maya's German, married to a German with a mother-in-law who was an amazing baker, and Maya herself was an incredible baker. So she was really an important resource. But also my family, my parents have lived here since the 70s. We have a lot of German friends. And every German family has their own sort of canon of German recipes. So it's really just a matter of talking to people, and everybody wants to talk about their favorite recipes. And so we did a lot of baking and a lot of weeding out. There, not every single thing we tried made it into the book. In fact, we have a graveyard of things that didn't. And then there are lots of things that didn't make it in because we couldn't figure out a way of making it accessible to American readers. Yeah, the most high profile of those in my own mind is the Aachener Printen, which are these, also a type of gingerbread from the town of Aachen, that are the greatest Christmas cookie ever. I love them so much, but they require ingredients that are just impossible to find in the States. And I didn't want to the whole point is that I'm giving you really authentic recipes with ingredients that you can find in the US and no substitutions.
Well, I actually, being from Germany and having lived here for the most part of my life so far, can tell the audience that yes, Luisa's book actually covers pretty much what I remember as like really the staple recipes. I found all the ones that I love personally and more. And someone was asking about a Google recipe that's also in there. There are actually really all the one basic recipe. I mean, anything that my students in my classes want to know, I can always say, this book here is a great resource. And I wish we would have something like that in German, because actually it only exists in English language, right?
Yes, it only exists in English. Nikki, that makes me so happy, because I think, at the end of the day, as much as I am from Berlin and, I feel like a Berliner, though not German, there is always this sort of worry that, did I get it right? And did I manage to understand it and transmit it the way that Germans would want it to be? And to me, the book was meant to be like, paying tribute and homage to the great baking tradition that I'm surrounded with and that I am so in awe of, really.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I find that always very interesting. I do like to immerse myself right now in the US baking traditions, particularly right now of the American South. And I find that, I find it always amazing, because a lot of people say, oh, that's not real good, even Americans even come to me and say, oh, that's not really good food. And it's not true. It's not true. And for me to actually access this country and that culture I live with now, it's a great way to do this by exploring the food and the baking and the traditions behind it, which I agree. So you did a wonderful job. And,
I just want to show you.
Those are the ones that are now baked.
These are
They're done, right? They're baked. Okay.
They're brown. They're very hot, so I can't pick them up yet. But they're firm.
But they're still kind of soft, aren't they? I mean, you wouldn't pick them up because they would be falling apart right now. I mean, not on you have them on wafers, but if you don't have them on wafers.
Let me see what we'll have.
Wafers? I say that wrong, I think.
Okay, so here's one that's on a wafer. It just kind of lifts right off. And it shouldn't be falling apart.
Okay. So they're tight on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the first one I did. This one that I did without a wafer.
Because somebody asked, should I let them sit a little bit on the tray? I did that yesterday. I just let them, like, for 10 minutes. I let them cool down before I moved them to a
wafer, you should let them sit for a little bit, because right now hot and they'll fall apart. But the ones with the wafer, they just lift right up. And
Does she have any information
there's
about when it was purchased or the order number? If she has any information, if you go to the transaction thing at the bottom,
I'm hearing now.
allow.
Let me see. This is Clementine. I think maybe I should be muted. I can't. Okay, now she's muted. All right.
Yeah, so that's it. And so you'll see the spread is not very, there's not barely a spread. And you want to wait until these are fully cooled before you do any chocolate dipping. And that's it. You made a Elisenlebkuchen.
Very good. So you dipping them in chocolate later on when they're entirely cooled down. I also learned that the chocolate shouldn't be like when you melt it, it shouldn't be too hot. The water shouldn't be too hot that you set it in. And one of the things I did with the chocolate that I got here, I put in some coconut oil, like a teaspoon, to make it a little bit more glossy, shiny, and softer too.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So that's what I did.
I use just plain melted chocolate because I like the sort of the snap, the chew. It has like a nice, but it's, you know, it won't be as shiny as it is if you.
Yeah, but there's also a difference in chocolate, isn't it, between Germany and the US chocolate bars? Yeah. So, there's more questions. Oh my God.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me see. What kind of chocolate did you use? That is just a chocolate bar, right? Like, was it semi-sweet or?
I'll show you. Sorry, my pantry makes the most annoying sound. I have two kinds of chocolate that I use. This is just the bog standard chocolate that's used for baking and melting and sticking things into. And
which you don't find in the US, I believe you can't find that here.
I don't know, it's 60% chocolate.
Oh, okay.
And then I discovered this sort of recently at our local grocery store. It's the same thing, but from Lindt, so it's a little fancier.
Oh, okay.
But I actually think it's less cocoa. Yeah, it's 50. So I would probably use, normally I would have used this one. Maybe to mix it up a little, I'll use this.
Yeah, that brand is actually available in the US. And then there are places like we have now Aldi and Lidl in the larger metropolitan areas. And they sell, of course, also the German style chocolate bars. Yes, imagine that.
Hi, everybody. So we're
So
closing in on our end time.
Oh, okay. We're almost done now.
We're almost done, but I thought there's so many great questions, so we won't be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, but there was one that I thought would be a really nice closing question for you, Luisa. It's which recipe in your book for you was your favorite discovery?
Oh my goodness, my favorite discovery. It's so hard because there were so many, and I truly love these recipes like they are my children, and it's very hard to pick. I will say that the Sachertorte might be my favorite discovery, just because I always thought I knew what a Sachertorte was until I learned to make it myself. And now I understand the mysteries of the universe. It's a really great cake. It's unlike any chocolate cake. It's really special. And I think that would have to be it. But then, of course, when I started that, I'm like, well, what about the strudel? And what about the gugelhupf? And what about? So yeah, it's hard. It's hard. There were a lot of great discoveries. The savory chapter alone was mind-blowing for me. I really enjoyed that.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys both so much for joining us today. This was so wonderful and such a great way to spend a couple of hours on a Sunday before Christmas. Everybody, if you don't already have Classic German Baking, we still have a couple of copies available here at the shop online, or just go out and support your favorite local bookstore and buy it from them. And to Nikki, thank you so much for moderating today, and to all of you for joining. It really means the world. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Clementine. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, everybody. This was great. Happy 4th Advent.
Yay. Happy
you.
holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thanks.